guys give me a hand?
A thick fog of darkness surrounds the farmhouse in a desolate town, and a loud thudding on the door is heard. As the door opens wide, we see a tall, creepy, mummified figure standing on the ground, gliding and floating in the air. His skin glows, but his eyes are as hollow as a dark void. Honestly, this is one of the many disturbing monster scenes in Courage the Cowardly Dog, but without them being so strangely off-putting, we can't even imagine this show's existence. Growing up, my relationship with horror kicked off with the Goosebumps book series and TV shows like Are You Afraid of the Dark, which were definitely shows dedicated to children, but some of the monster and creature designs were way ahead of their time. The most fascinating thing about them was that these monsters were neither fully supernatural predators nor completely human, which used to trigger all kinds of anxieties in my mind. So, if you're ready to face the fears that you once left behind in childhood, hang tight to the end of this video, because today I'm going to talk about the top 10 most disturbing monsters from the 90s kids shows, which are still pretty iconic.
Turn the slide.
What's your offer?
King Ramses, Courage the Cowardly Dog, 1999 to 2002. King Ramses appeared in the very first season of Courage the Cowardly Dog in an episode titled King Ramses' Curse. Ramses was made with an early 90s uncanny 3D CGI that didn't quite blend in with the show's hand-drawn, cartoonish atmosphere, but that incongruity was what actually creeped out an entire generation. The episode begins with two thieves stealing a slab from Ramses' Egyptian tomb and keeping it hidden near the water pump behind Bag's farmhouse. This is the first time Ramses emerges from his fog of darkness and warns the thieves about the curse. But when the foolish thieves ignore him, they are suddenly attacked and eaten by a giant locust. Now the slab is found by our cowardly dog, Courage, who brings it home, but Eustace throws it away. However, later when the TV news reveals that the slab is worth $1 million, Eustace is blinded by the green. He immediately takes the slab back and refuses to return it. Meanwhile, the ominous darkness falls over the farmhouse and a mysterious fog appears once again, with Ramses' spirit emerging from it. In his cold and haunting voice, he demands only one thing: return the slab or suffer the curse. Eustace stubbornly holds on to the slab, so Ramses curses them with 3 plagues. First, a flood, secondly, a spooky song played on a hidden phonograph, and lastly, an attack by a swarm of locusts. So finally, Courage has to throw it out. But Eustace's overwhelming greed pushes him to even confront Ramses, and the consequence is pretty bad. The slab returned to its rightful place, but Eustace got trapped inside it as a punishment for his greed. John R. Dilworth did a lot of experiments to create some really unsettling monsters in the TV show, and I think Ramses might have topped them all with that animatronic look and an uncanny voice demanding the slab. Slappy the Dummy, Goosebumps, 1995 to 1998. When the Goosebumps TV show came out in 1995, we thought Slappy the Dummy appeared for 1 episode only, following the typical Monster of the Week formula. But then he literally became the mascot of the entire Goosebumps series. And why wouldn't he? Have you ever seen him suddenly popping out of nowhere, standing right behind you, letting you know about his presence through his haunting laughter? Slappy is basically a ventriloquist, first appearing in R.L. Stine's book series of the same name. He's a dull but a sentient one with some dark history behind its origin. Some say Slappy used to be the puppet of a demon, and that's why he's cursed and outright malevolent and manipulative, just like an evil force. Slappy made his debut in the episode called Night of the Living Dummy 2, where a young ventriloquist, Amy, replaces her previous doll, Denise, with Slappy, whom she accidentally awakened by chanting a hidden spell. You and I are one now. And bam! This cute-looking little toy man became a manipulative monster who just simply wanted to enslave Amy. Yes, Slappy's kinda sadistic that way, but the worst thing about him is that he never really dies in any of the episodes. Yes, you can defeat him at the end of the story, but he'll come back again, as he did in Night of the Living Dummy 3 and Bride of the Living Dummy. Even in 2018, he returned in the sequel, Goosebumps 2 Haunted Halloween, where he started haunting his creator, the author R.L. Stine, played by Jack Black. Slappy took an even scarier form in the IDW published comics, where he was imagined in the creepiest way possible. because the creators didn't have any limitation in the comics. If this version of Slappy had made it to the show, I think we wouldn't even get a show after all. Zebo the Clown, Are You Afraid of the Dark? 1992 through 1996. Once again, I'm going to tickle your colrophobia, aka the phobia of clowns, with another clown monster of the 90s. But don't worry, it's not another cosmic entity deciding to take a clown disguise. It is actually the spirit of a thief who worked in the circus. Yes, I'm talking about Zebo the Clown from one of my most favorite 90s shows, Are You Afraid of the Dark? Zebo appeared in the second season in August 1992 in an episode titled The Tale of Laughing in the Dark. The episode begins with a precocious and cocky teen, Josh, visiting an amusement park with his best friend and his sister. When they enter a fun house and hear the legend of Zebo the Clown, Josh makes fun of it. Zebo once stole $4,000 from the circus and sneaked inside this fun house to hide from the police, but a lit-up cigar in his hand dropped on the ground, setting a fire that engulfed the entire place and the clown inside. Ever since, the place became a haunting ground for his spirit. However, Josh, who didn't believe a single word of this story, took a dare to prove his bravery. He sneaked inside the funhouse at midnight and ripped off the clown mannequin's nose. Josh thought it was cool, but it instantly became a curse for him. Zebo began to haunt Josh in various other ways, sometimes appearing in the mirror and sometimes emitting cigar smoke to let him know about his presence. In the end, Josh finally gave the nose back along with a pack of newly bought cigars as a token of apology. Zebo's appearance was way different from what we saw in the other clowns. He's big with messy hair, but the most disturbing thing about him is his yellow eyes and a big frozen grin, which is still pretty fresh and intact in our memories. Him, the Powerpuff Girls, 1998 through 2005. Almost 3 decades have passed, but the Powerpuff Girls are still the most relevant pop culture icons. Craig McCracken's vision of little schoolgirls beating up bad guys is still pretty chic and too cool to handle. And so is the monster and the ultimate villain of the series, created by Craig. And I'm not talking about Mojo Jojo, because he's the kind of creature who is still understandable. But him. We could never really know what exactly he was. Was he a demon, the devil, or just some creepy guy in a disguise? We all know him for his most memorable red-skinned body, long limbs with the lobster claws, black high heels, and a medieval-style beard that was just a terrifying combination to even imagine. And he was inspired by the Blue Meanies from the Beatles' Yellow Submarine animated film. More than his look, what always unsettled me was his manipulative tactics. Remember in an episode titled Octi Evil how he manipulated Bubbles by targeting her emotionally? He also had some other ways to get his work done, like being the ultimate master of puppets. He mind-controlled his victims into getting them to work for him so that he could feed on people's fears and sufferings. Well, these are some of the widely known theories around him because Craig kept him very subtle for a kids show and never really explained his demonic origin or anything like that. We all knew that before naming the monster him, his initial name was Dev as a short form of devil. But the show refused to incorporate any kind of religious mockery, thereby changing the name into him. The Pool Monster, The Drowned, Are You Afraid of the Dark? 1990 through 1996. Are You Afraid of the Dark wasn't just showing us the fear of darkness and creepy creatures crawling out of a deep dark abyss, but it was showing us all kinds of fear that existed in the world, like the fear of water. Inspired by movies like Creature from the Black Lagoon, Jaws, and many more, this famous TV show featured one episode called The Tale of the Dead Man's Float, airing in 1995, which was more like a mini creature feature than a regular TV episode. The story follows 2 kids, Zeke and Cloris, who have to learn swimming lessons for their upcoming competition. But Zeke is shit scared of water. Hidden in their school, there is a pool with some unresolved mysteries. When the 2 try to test the water of this pool, they find a black substance floating in the water, which is the haunting spirit of a lifeguard who lost his life by drowning in the water decades ago. His spirit is now claiming the water to be his home, so if anyone disturbed his peace, he would drag them into the water to drown them. When Zeke put some methyl orange into the water to see what it was, the spirit took a terrifying, monstrous look of a decaying, skeletal figure colored in red. They finally put an end to it by pouring a chemical into the water, which finally dissolved his body away. The practical makeup effects were hands down an amazing work of art, especially for a TV series like this. They really did care about the true essence of the story, and that's why, instead of being a cartoonish and comic figure, their monsters gave us a constant feeling of unease, because back then, we didn't have any idea how to define this kind of fear. Freaky Fred, Courage the Cowardly Dog, 1999 through 2002. Courage the Cowardly Dog was the kind of show where the monsters could be just an idea. A very bad idea. Monsters are not always literally flesh-eating creatures crawling out of the dark, but monsters can be the evilness of a human mind, even for a children's show in the 90s. Courage's most iconic encounter was with the barber, Freaky Fred, a psychopath who's obsessed with shaving hair and turning people and animals bald. After his parole from the home of Freaky Barbers, a mental asylum, he came to the farmhouse to meet his Aunt Muriel, who welcomed him with open arms as she would do to anyone. But Courage could sense the ominous vibe from the get-go. Right after Muriel went out for a while, leaving Fred and Courage alone, Fred took the dog to the bathroom and shaved him off. Fred always talks in rhyming words and has a tendency to make everything naughty. The British voice actor Paul Scheffler's deep and eerie style of saying naughty was the most bizarre experience a kid could have had at that time. Fred wasn't really a monster because his human appearance was enough to scare the hell out of anyone. He was tall, very calm, and had a cold demeanor, messy blonde hair, green diseased eyes, and a weird grin on his face. In my opinion, he was the embodiment of a sociopathic serial killer. But as a TV show, there were restrictions on the portrayal of violence. The creators couldn't just showcase a serial killer on the loose, killing everyone. So instead, they added a comical and freaky touch to it to make it more acceptable. But Freaky Fred's naughty smile was sufficient to unsettle the innocent mind of a child. The Demon in the Mattress, Courage the Cowardly Dog, 1999 to 2002. Since we are talking about Courage the Cowardly Dog, I would have to mention the Demon Mattress, the kind of horror that would literally make you think twice before you get into bed for a good night's sleep. Demon Mattress aired in 1999, proving that the show can literally turn any regular household into a terrifying monster. Muriel started complaining about her mattress that is not functional anymore. She had spent a long time without having a proper night's sleep, so she's about to get a new one. The next day, the newspaper revealed a mysterious mattress company selling a life-changing mattress. Muriel placed the order on the phone, but the company already knew their address. Then a horse-drawn carriage stopped by the farmhouse, and a strange-looking rat and a weasel carried the mattress inside. Later that night, when Muriel finally went to bed, she strangely levitated and turned into a green-colored monster with an orange-colored hair. She began to talk in a very unnatural and deep demonic voice, asking Eustace and Courage to join in. Then her head twisted and fell off her body and rolled down onto the ground. And speaking of this scene, I should mention that this episode was actually a parody inspired by the classic horror film The Exorcist. But you can imagine that the kids who had no idea what Exorcist was and might have experienced the worst nightmare of their lives just for this scene. Muriel, after being possessed by this demon, did the most unthinkable stuff in a children's show like Courage. She revealed her giant purple tongue to lick Eustace's jaw, and then also vomited on him. However, finally, when the demon got out of her body and possessed Eustace, Courage and Muriel captured him, and after wrapping him up with the mattress, sent the whole thing back to the mysterious place where it came from. The most terrifying thing about this episode was Eustace's unresolved fate, as no one really knew what the demon really did to him at the end. Venom, Spider-Man, the animated series, 1994 to 1998. In 1994, John Semper Jr. developed a Spider-Man animated series for the Fox Kids network based on some of the famous comic book stories of the superhero, and gave us one of the most disturbingly looking Venoms of all time. They were not even subtle with this look, because I can still remember this version of Venom giving me heebie-jeebies at that time. The exaggerated lips and sharp teeth with a really long reptile-like tongue slithering out were way too creepy for the kids. Now, we all know who Venom is, but if you want a quick revisit, go watch the 3-part episode The Alien Costume from the series, where they showed the origin story of Venom, from being an alien symbiote to possessing Eddie Brock and turning into Spider-Man's rival. You can learn everything from these episodes. However, later, Venom sided with Peter and teamed up together to fight their common enemy, Carnage, in an episode titled Carnage. In live-action films, his character took an even more grotesque form, mostly based on his comic appearances. But the animated Venom from the 90s show is universally the scariest one. Ghostwriter, 1992 to 1995. PBS. When PBS was bringing kids shows in the 90s, they were mostly educational and motivational, and as a horror series, Ghostwriter wasn't doing anything different. They were trying to teach the children how to solve problems, and that's why there was an invisible power or a ghost who used to help a group of teenagers solve mysteries in their neighborhood. We never really know who this ghost is except for his communication method, which was mostly words and letters trying to look like a hint for the group. However, one small twist came in a 4-part episode called Attack of the Slime Monster, where we were introduced to a really creepy and grotesque-looking slime monster called Gooey Gus. Actually, he even had a backstory. So, a bubblegum factory worker once overheated the slime, turning it into a creature, and since then, if overheated, the slime doll can be activated into a monstrous being. Gooey looked pretty sick. His purple-colored skin, his eyes bulging out of his face, and his weirdly cunning grin gave off the vibe of a 90s R-rated creature feature movie. After getting activated, he roamed around the city, leaving trails of his slime wherever he went. But the worst thing about him was that he wouldn't directly kill you. He would trap you within a cocoon made of slime. That's how he managed to trap some of the group's members, and then turning into a 7-foot-tall giant, he attacked them. In the end, he was defeated, but not before terrorizing the entire generation that wasn't ready for such a horrific transformation. Peaches, Rocko's Modern Life, 1993 through 1996. Alright, now that I've finally come to the end of this video, I want to keep it short and a bit sarcastic. In 1993, when Rocko's Modern Life came out on Nickelodeon, it was already pretty infamous for its adult humor and dark satire. But then we were introduced to a dark underlord, a cartoonish embodiment of a demonic force whose name is Peaches. That's the irony and tragedy of Peaches. Even though he looked pretty scary, no one really took him seriously. He first appeared in the first season episode titled To Heck and Back, where Heck is established as neither heaven nor hell, but a place in between. A place mostly for the tourists, as Heifer would say. One day, when Heifer choked on a chicken bone, he was sent to Heck, where for the first time, he encountered Peaches in dark clothing completely covering him up from head to toe. However, Peaches is not actually scary all the time. He's sarcastic and the greatest failure of his world, because in 600 years, he could never manage to bring a soul to Heck. Peaches was a mockery of demons and devils, so the creators intentionally made him a funny character instead of giving him a serious appearance. And that's why we do remember him, but mostly as a hilarious, arrogant demon who couldn't even do his job properly. Well, last but not least, I would like to say that these monsters in children's shows were never meant to traumatize children, and I don't think they ever really did that to us. Rather, it introduced us to a really tasteful horror, prepping us up for the grotesque world outside. However, on that note, this video is over. If you have enjoyed the video, please hit the like button and subscribe to our channel. Also, don't forget to leave a comment below to mention your favorite monster from a 90s kids show. Until then, goodbye and see you in the next one.